So far for the 3 nights, how's the mark you like to give to the Democrat Party?
So the Democrat Party has held DNC for the third night, and the week progress, we have seen a clear message of the party that is building up to the top highlight of the DNC on Thursday, which is tonight in the U.S., and that is an acceptance speech from former Vice President Joe Biden. And we have seen many women are represented in this convention. We have seen from the first night, Governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitman, Michelle Obama was also on the first night, and Mayor of DC, Muriel Bowser, also has a spotlight during the DNC. And Tammy Duckworth, the Thai American senator, is also speak tonight as well. I think the DNC is trying to deliver messages, and we have heard many buzzwords that Joe Biden is going to restore, reunite. He'll be more authority. They talk about his experience, integrity, and empathy. So we have seen that the DNC is trying to appeal to the broad voters in the US leading up to the election on November.
Do you think it's deliberate for them to try to show how women capacity can be highlight for the Democrat Party?
I think the message that Kamala Harris got nominated for the vice president candidate by the DNC has sent a message to women in the US that the party has an intention to appeal to this demographic group, that's for sure. And also, at the same time, from the GOP camp, President Donald Trump also appealed to women as well this week. He pardoned a woman in the US history who who in the past broke the law to vote over 140 years ago, when there was a movement for women's right to vote. And President Trump pardoned this woman, Susan Anthony, and he said that this woman should be pardoned from what she did in the past, and she was an iconic figure for women's rights in the US.
And so far, from your observation, what's the feedback from Americans in general toward the Democratic Convention?
Yeah, I think the enthusiasm in the US may be reflected by the audience of people who are tuning to this DNC broadcast. And according to Nelson, there's about 19 million people watch it on TV, and that compared to over 26 million or about 26 million when the Democrat whole national convention 4 years ago when Hillary Clinton was nominated. So it's less than 4 years ago, but Biden campaign said that about 10 million people tuned to the program online, which is what makes this DNC different from other DNCs because of the COVID-19, and most of the events are held virtually.
We noticed that all of the key speakers were ready to blame President Trump for their failure in handling the pandemic and other issues. Are these remarks expected from you or from the people?
The first night, we have heard that people try to lay out what are the important issues, and COVID-19 was among the topics that were mentioned on the first night on Monday, and as well as the issues of social justice. We have Brothers of George Floyd talk on Monday as well, and the criticism for Donald Trump, we have seen more last night when former President Obama took the stage. He broadcast from American Museum of Revolution in Philadelphia, and former President Obama seems to departed from the tradition of being above the fray. He direct the criticism to Donald Trump about his readiness to handle big issues like COVID-19.
Yeah. Kun Rattaphol, with the convention, Democratic Convention, is quite unusual because this is the first time that they do it online. So what's the reflection for the whole situation of the US, and does it really convey what they would like to convey to the American public, that the US is now being very much affected by COVID-19?
That's a very good point. We have seen that a lot of people who join the convention are very careful, including reporters. We have seen that some reporters are actually in Delaware where former Vice President Joe Biden and his family were there. And also during the COVID-19, a lot of issues about public health policy were mentioned during this convention. So American people are very much aware of this crisis, and they're very careful about that. The numbers now are quite alarming. Over 5 million people are infected, and as for the death, it's over 170,000 people.
And do you think that COVID-19 will shake up sentiment of Americans, and then they will support the Democrat more than President Trump and Republican Party?
That remains to be seen. According to the Pew Research, COVID-19 is a big issue for American people. But number one, at the top of Americans' mind, according to Pew Research this month, is economic issue, followed by healthcare. The Supreme Court choice is number 3. COVID-19 is number 4. And violent crime is number 5. So although the issue is fresh and the issue of COVID-19 make news headlines, is not number 1 according to this poll in American people's minds.
So let's say if Biden wins the election, what would be the first thing that the new administration would do to clean up the mess that the Trump administration did?
National agendas, I think COVID-19 would still be an issue in November, December, and January. If former Vice President Joe Biden win the election, at that time, there would be an issue of distributing vaccines, if there's one by then. But Dr. Anthony Fauci of NIH has said that he expects that the vaccine should be available around that time. So I think that would be a top agenda of whoever wins the election would have to take the COVID-19 as one of the top priorities.
And Kun Rattaphol, in the past 3 nights, you must be following the speech by each speaker very, very closely. Who has given the most touching speech for you in the DNC?
The longest speech so far has been former President Barack Obama last night from Philadelphia. And as I said earlier, he broke from the tradition that usually ex-presidents try to be more conciliatory and kind of avoid saying anything negative to the current administration. So President Obama made a statement about the leadership of Joe Biden because they have worked together for 8 years in the White House. And he said that big decisions that he made has Joe Biden along his side. Also, when President Obama made that statement last night, President Trump also tweeted that questioning why Obama waited a long time before endorsing Joe Biden, and And earlier this week, when Michelle Obama talked about Joe Biden, President Trump also responded that if it were not Barack Obama, he would not be in the White House right now. And President Trump said that, and he's proud about his achievement in strengthening American economy.
Yeah. And what about Michelle Obama? Because she appeared on the first night and she strongly attacked President Trump as well.
Michelle Obama has broad base, especially for African American voters. Yes, she talked about the readiness of President Trump. She explicitly said that he's the wrong guy in the White House, and President Trump kind of strategically responded to that by saying that it is his job to clean up the mess that created by the performance of her husband, former President Obama, and President Trump pivoted quickly to talk about his economic achievements.
And next week will be the Republicans' turn. So what will be the main issues that are likely to be addressed at their conventions next week?
RNC is planning, is in the stage of creating a lineup of speakers. So far, we have seen definitely President Trump would take an acceptance speech, and it's most likely that he will broadcast live from the White House, and that is a controversial choice because it's a government property, and RNC is a political event. Other people who are expected to speak include Vice President Mike Pence and Ivanka Trump and Donald Trump Jr. Are expected to be among the speakers at RNC.
But how could RNC arrange to have the convention in traditional way of having real people meeting, unlike the Democrats would have it online?
Yeah, RNC would be in a limited fashion as well. We will see a clearer picture maybe later this week. From what we learned and have seen during the DNC, we have seen that a majority of activities are online. Usually we see hundreds of thousands of people coming to the convention, and there's a lot of energy from the crowd. Without that, the organizer has to be creative. For example, you have the benefit of controlling time. You have the benefit of carefully plan the speeches. Some of the speakers at DNC who are known to be loquacious, taking a long time to speak, like former President Bill Clinton. Now, this week we saw him send a clip, talking about Joe Biden. So this kind of format, I think, set the stage for the future big convention if COVID-19 is still around.
And Kun Rattaphol, was it a surprise for you to see Cindy McCain and Colin Powell cross the party line to support Joe Biden? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
The DNC is trying to bring in a lot of GOPs to support Joe Biden as well. On the first night, John Kasich, who tried to get presidential ticket for the GOP 4 years ago, who competed with Donald Trump in the primaries, also appear on the DNC. He was standing, in a symbolic path that has two ways apart, splitting, and he's making the case that he was choosing country over party. So after John Kasich made that appearance, we saw General Colin Powell talking about Joe Biden on his ability to protect the nation, talk about his credentials on national security, and also Cindy McCain the widow of John McCain, is also voicing that support of Joe Biden. So it's part of the Democrats' effort to bring these people, and in a larger scheme, they try to represent a broad voters. Because while we see these GOP supporting Joe Biden, we also see that party members from the left wing, like Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, appear at the DNC events as well.
So from now up until the November elections, what are we supposed to watch out for, whether it's the presidential debate or the vice presidential debate or other events? Is there anything we have to look out for during these times?
Yeah, for sure. I think the next on agenda would be the Republican National Convention. We will wait to see what President Trump has to say in his acceptance speech, and then there would be debates, as you mentioned. It would be interesting to see the debates between both President Trump and Joe Biden, and also Kamala Harris and Vice President Mike Pence.
Overall, how do you see, are people upbeat with this election mostly?
Yeah, the issues of mail-in voting is top of the agenda for a lot of people. There has been some concerns because a lot of people would find themselves vulnerable for infection if they vote in person. So a lot of people paying a lot more attention on mail-in votings, and during the DNC, we heard Hillary Clinton talk about taking the steps for mail-in voting. So if anything, we'll see more mail-in voting this year.
So in your perspective, does mail-in voting cause voter fraud, just like how President Trump claimed earlier ago?
We looked at the news reports about mail-in voting fraud, and it looked like the evidence were not there yet, that in the past the fraud that occurred during election is very next to nothing.
And Kun Rattaphol, with COVID-19, what's the prospect of foreign correspondents to cover presidential election? Are we allowed to go into the US to cover the election this year? What's the prospect?
I think it depends on national policy, how difficult it is for certain countries to enter the U.S. Territories, and it has to be done case by case basis. And I'm sure that news reporter, at least what I see from American colleagues, they take very careful approach on covering news stories during the election. And we have seen that, in the political rallies, which we don't see a lot these days because of the COVID-19.
And for people who enter the US, is it under quarantine or state quarantine procedure that all have to obey and to stay under state quarantine when we arrive the US?
Yeah, a lot of people who travel in and out the U.S. are subject to certain procedures to make sure that the COVID-19 is under control. So on that, immigration issues and also the public health issues, that's in the mind of people who handle borders and immigration procedures.
Yeah. At the current state, what's the approval rating of President Trump and popularity of Joe Biden?
Yeah, I look at the poll before coming on air today. For national popularity, Joe Biden have a quite solid lead over President Donald Trump. But in the swing state or battleground states that we have to watch closely in November election, some states, they are tied, such as in Wisconsin and Florida. It's quite neck and neck. And in Arizona, President Trump actually visiting Arizona this week, and President Trump took the lead in Arizona, and Joe Biden had a lead in Michigan.
Now that Biden is leading in many of the national polls, is there a possibility that the final results will change completely, just like what happened back in 2016?
Yeah, I think the usefulness of poll is that it's a snapshot of the moment. Like if they are going to vote, if the people are going to vote today, what would be the result? And we have seen that in the past, when Hillary Clinton seems to have big leads and she ended up losing electoral votes. Although she has 3 million people over Donald Trump in terms of popular votes. So I think when we look at poll, it's just under assumption that if people go out and vote today, what the result might be. But there are 75 days before November the 3rd. That's the next election day. So a lot of things could change.
So when Hillary Clinton mentioned during the DNC that Joe and Kamala can win by 3 million votes and still lose the election, can you explain why that is for those who are still confused with the process?
Yeah, in the states that are populous on the coast, like California and New York, a lot of people would go out to vote, and that result in high numbers of popular votes. But the deciding factor for a person to become the president of the U.S. is that person has to win electoral college, which is a number of representatives for each state who would cast the vote, contributing to the total tally of who will win the election. So popular votes is from the numbers of people who go out and support certain candidates, but electoral vote is for the representatives of each state, which vary based on population and how they cast their vote to the candidates for the presidential election.